Hi there, it's another Tuesday, which means it's time for another in real life video. And this time, I figured, hey, what better time to get all dressed up in a fun, fancy little suit, put on a little fun outfit, and talk about the Game Awards and vote in them, right? It's that time of year. It is the 2023 Game Awards. Now, also, in the name of being cheap and sustainability that's good for the planet, I also want to point out this whole outfit I'm wearing, this fancy schmancy suit, the one suit I actually own, is entirely secondhand, entirely thrifted, right? So, hey, you can do it. If you want to get something fancy, try and look secondhand. It's a great way to be conscientious of the environment, and even if you don't care if you're some kind of monster, it's a great way to save a ton of money. Now, without further ado, we will go into the usual sort of picture-in-picture mode here. We will fade into what I can only assume we will do a bit of a fade cut. That way it looks incredibly natural, and maybe you won't even notice that happened, but who can say? Anyway, we'll fade over right here, and we'll get to looking at the site, and we'll get into voting, right? I've watched the Game Awards since, I think, at least 2010. The Keeleys, as they were, from Jeff Keighley. They've come quite a long way in that time. They used to be quite the wild event. Who could forget the robot, the shaver robot? I won't say the brand name because, I mean, if they want me to say the brand name, they better pay me or something like that, right? You feel what I'm saying? Also, if who could also forget, this is how I date the first one that I had watched. In 2010, that is when they first announced Skyrim would be a game that exists, right? They had a whole bunch of monks dressed up on stage. I believe one of them turned out to be Todd Howard or something like that, or maybe he came up afterward. But they did this whole, I guess it was meant to be sort of like pseudo graybeards or whatever, but they all came up on stage and did a fun little announcement. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's do some voting, right? Let's talk about it. All right, here we are in our fun little picture-in-picture mode. You know, the usual. I just like calling it picture-in-picture. It reminds me of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Anyway, you too can vote in the Game Awards for the nominees if you did not know. Like I said, the Game Awards have come a long way. It used to be nobody really took it very seriously at all, and a lot of people laughed about and joked about, and they still do, but by way of just being around for a long time and just continually upgrading its production values over time, Jeff Keighley has managed to turn it into something else that actually does convey some degree of respect, and also it becomes openly a target in some ways. Who could forget last year's, where that one kid came up on stage? Wow, I would imagine that there will be security this year, I would guess. Anyway, you too can vote in this, and I believe, except for the Player's Choice Award, the nominees, whoever wins each category, is only given a 10% sway by audience voting, which I think is a good thing because you get weird view botting, people who play video games, but gamers are the G word. They are typically clowns, right? I mean, just look at me, but are typically clowns, and will just get up to all sorts of nonsense, right? So, hey, thankfully, there's only 10% sway one way or the other. Roughly 10% from what I've heard. Instead, they have a panel of jurors who are, I believe, a amalgamation of people who work in the industry in some form or the other. I'm not sure if there's actually any sort of like content creators, any sort of influencers as they were on that panel. I would have to imagine so, especially if you're into, like if you're a YouTuber who does reviews, if you're a big, well-known YouTuber who does reviews that are fairly respected, I could see that being the case. But also, definitely, there are renowned names, from my understanding, renowned names who are like video games journalists, people who work in video games at various levels. I think a fair amount of, I don't know for certain, but folks who work in the games industry for sure do vote in these, and that is how we even got these nominees in the first place. And without further ado, finally, let's begin. There we go. Now they start us off with the hottest topic already, right? The game of the year itself, the main show. We begin here at the beginning. Now, a lot of folks will say one way or the other, like I said, we touched on this. A lot of folks talk about what has and hasn't been nominated for these various roles and whatnot, right? For example, this year, a lot of people talking about how Starfield didn't get nominated, right? Which, although I'm like really into Starfield, I get it, right? I get it. I liked Fallout 76, so I'm no stranger to being like, yeah, I get it. I'm fine being just a weirdo who enjoys this, right? But I think some folks get a little too worked up and a little too involved if their own opinion is invalidated. Like we've said before in a past In Real Life video, we talked about reviews and opinion and how stuff like that works. And generally, award contests like this are popularity contests to some degree. Even if it's not by mass consensus, which this is not, like I said, it's got a panel of jurors, it is still a popularity contest among the jurors, among the people who are judging the different roles and all of that, right? And it's totally fine to like and enjoy something that isn't popular, right? So long as you understand sort of how you came to that point and you see where other people are coming from, right? Anyway, for Game of the Year, recognizing a game that delivers the absolute best experience across all creative and technical fields, here we've got a lineup of 6, which I think is usually not the norm. I want to say typically, and we'll see here going forward, I think typically they have, on average, or the median, I would say, is 5 entries per category. But here we've got Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4, the remake, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. What a year as well for releases. Holy crap. There could have been so many more on this list. Even barring Starfield, right, which I have a personal enjoyment of, there could have been so many more. There's not even a single indie game up here for grabs, right? There are games that are more independent, right? As you can see, Larian up there. But nothing in the sort of, I don't know, the realm of thinking, oh, this is an indie game, you know? Something made by just like a few people or whatever, or a single person, right? There's nothing quite like that up here for Game of the Year. Usually there's at least one, but not this year, because this year was absolutely stacked. Anyway, for a lot of these, because of that, because this was such a stacked year filled with tons of games, I haven't played a lot of them, right? I have not played very many of them. Every year, I don't get the chance to play all of them. But this year especially, there's been so many, and it's been kind of a busy year for me too, all things considered. There's been a lot going on in my personal life this year, for better or worse. But this year, haven't had the chance to play a lot of them, so I want to vote for sort of my own pick, what I would like to see win, and then also what I think will win, right? I want to give more credence, more toward placing bets on what I think will win, right? And if anything, you know what? Let's make what I think will win our main vote. That way it's easier for me to go back and look over it. Like I said, it's really only 10% sway, so I don't mind sort of voting for what I think will win. All right. So here, I mean, what can you say about all of these? They're all really good. I am a little surprised to see here, and a lot of folks have already talked this to death, folks saying that they're a little surprised to see Resident Evil 4 here, because it is a remake and not a brand new game fully, you know? Which, in saying that, it begs the question, do you think remakes should be in the running for Game of the Year? And I would say they should. Remasters, I don't think so. But remakes, especially to the degree of Resident Evil 4, or even either of the other two recent Resident Evil remakes, I feel like they should be up for the running. I'm just surprised that they gave it a nominee for Game of the Year, right? I feel like I would rather have non-remakes up there, but I get it. You have to redo basically the entire game. There's new VO, there's new plot points, there's obviously you have to completely redesign levels and mechanics and all sorts of stuff like that. A ton of work goes into it. You shouldn't diminish just how much effort goes into it, right? And like we said, Resident Evil 4 Remake has been, it's a banger. These are all bangers, in my opinion. All bangers all around. The year of bangers. You have too many bangers. Personally, I really love Alan Wake 2. I have not yet finished it, but I really, really like it. I'm very near the end. However, even in saying that, I feel like I haven't even played it yet. It is coming up. We will be playing it on the channel, of course, just to reiterate. I always get questions about it, even though I've talked about it in many places. But we will, of course, be playing Baldur's Gate 3. And who could deny Baldur's Gate 3 this year the Game of the Year award, right? I think my personal vote would be for Baldur's Gate 3, and I think Baldur's Gate 3 is going to win Game of the Year, right? I cannot wait to see Swen, I think that's how you pronounce his name, the folks over at Larian get on stage and accept the award. They 100%, I think, will get it. But like I said, these are all bangers. If it ends up that Baldur's Gate doesn't get Game of the Year at the Game Awards this year, I don't think I'd be too beaten up over it. Resident Evil 4 taking it is a real dark horse, right? I think you would hear some stuff about that given it is a remake like we were talking about. But any of these, sure. But I do think it's Baldur's Gate 3's category to lose. And I think that will be occurring a lot throughout the Game Awards. All right, so let's vote for it. There we are. Keep voting. Let's go for the next category. There we are. Good. Here, let me also scoot my own picture up here a bit. Oh, there we go. Good. Next category. There we are. Now, a lot of folks will do, like, watch-alongs and stuff for the Game Awards when they come out, but I'm not planning to do anything like that. Maybe in future years we will do that. I'll do, like, a live sort of stream or commentary or pre-recorded whatever, sort of reaction to it, because they always do video game announcements as well alongside. People are anticipating that they will reveal Grand Theft Auto 6's first trailer. I would guess we'll probably also see like Dragon's Dogma in some capacity there. Anyway, Best Game Direction. Awarded for outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design. So we've got Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man 2, Mario Brothers Wonder, and Tears of the Kingdom. I would say it is very clearly to me between Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2. And I personally would give it to Alan Wake 2 because Alan Wake 2 is like video game direction, the game, right? It is that sort of art house type of video game that when people ask, are video games art? Do they have creative vision, right? What sort of weird sorts of ways of presenting the game? Is there a cool presentation or something, right? Anytime someone asks, are games art? I think Alan Wake 2 is one of those games that you can easily point to, and even someone unfamiliar with video games will say, okay, you know what, you're right. Video games are art, right? It's a very artsy video game. It oozes it. It leaks it out. It's dripping with direction. That said, I think that there's a very good chance that Baldur's Gate 3 could do it, right? Make no mistake, Baldur's Gate 3, from the sounds of it, I have not played it yet myself, right? And like I said, this will be a recurring theme throughout. It is a juggernaut. I could see Baldur's Gate 3 taking it. But I want to say, so personally, I would give it to Alan Wake 2. Now, I think also the Game Awards will vote to give it to Alan Wake 2. Because they will plan to give I think that they will do some, what would you call it? A lot of award shows do this, right? Like the Oscars famously will give an award to someone in one category because they aren't planning to give the award to that person in another category, right? Or a film, I should say, right? And I think the same will happen here because Baldur's Gate 3 is very likely, I think, to win Game of the Year overall. I could very easily see them giving Best Direction and other more artsy sorts of picks to Alan Wake 2, right? But I don't know. For direction, I could see it either way. Baldur's Gate 3 or Alan Wake 2. For creative vision and innovation in game design, others here on the list, Spider-Man 2, Mario Brothers Wonder, Tears of the Kingdom, they do, make no mistake, innovate and do have creative vision, but they're very much of a type, of a kind, right? I would even argue that Baldur's Gate 3 is of a kind. It's just a perfection of what Larian did with Divinity Original Sin 2, right? It's just another more refined, better version of that, right? Which I think you could make the case for with Spider-Man, Mario, and Zelda, right? I think you can make the same case there. Whereas Alan Wake 2 is, without spoiling anything, it's a trip. It's not very much like a lot of other horror games if we're regarding direction and narrative, it is very odd. It very much stands on its own, and I think it sticks. It pulls it off with stunning panache. So I think they'll give it to Alan Wake 2. Okay, next category here. Best Narrative for outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a game. Ooh. So we've got Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Phantom Liberty, an expansion DLC. Granted, one that got quite the fanfare. And Final Fantasy 16 and Spider-Man 2. Once again, I think that this is going to be between Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2. Like I said, there's so much fanfare over Phantom Liberty, but I find it highly unlikely for them to give it to DLC because it's so much more impressive when you can weave your narrative into the core game, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like they would be more likely to get that if it were just a standalone game in and of itself. I don't know. I feel like there is some degree of debuff, as it were, because Phantom Liberty is DLC, right? I have a difficult time choosing between Alan Wake 2 and Baldur's Gate 3. But I think I have to give it to Baldur's Gate 3 here. Right? I absolutely love, and I am playing through and I'm nearly at the end of Alan Wake 2's narrative. And I do think it has, like, amazing storytelling and narrative and all of that. And it's incredibly weird and good about it. And it works on so many levels without spoiling anything. But I think between the two of these, you have to measure. And to be clear, Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2 are both tied for the most nominated games for the Game Awards this year. I believe both have between them, or each, 8 nominations. So they're really the real powerhouses here. But I think you gotta give it to Baldur's Gate 3 in this category because Baldur's Gate 3 has so much reactivity, and it changes so much depending on your player agency, right? I feel like that's a big factor. As satisfying as Alan Wake 2 is, as much as I enjoy it, I feel like, it's linear, right? The execution is superb, is amazing, is unlike a lot, if anything, I've ever seen in video games. But Baldur's Gate 3 also nails execution, I presume, right? From what I've heard, from what little I know of it, it nails the execution, but also the way in which it flows as well, depending on your actions, the way in which it permits a high degree of player agency, whereas Alan Wake 2 is a linear narrative, right? It always plays out the same. If you whether I play it or you, gentle viewer, play it, we will have the same experience. We'll be able to share a talk about over coffee or whatever, because we'll have had the same experience in that way. We'll know the exact same story beats if we did the exact same things, right? The only way you don't see the same things is if you don't do optional stuff. Whereas Baldur's Gate 3 has optional stuff and it has things that can stray and the path can divvy up immensely. So I think I got to give it to Baldur's Gate 3 personally, and I think Baldur's Gate 3 will take it. All right. Next one. Now, we won't take so long for all of these categories, I think, because there is simply some of these categories don't bear the discussion, right? They aren't worth that amount of talk. Best art direction. For outstanding creative and or technical achievement in artistic design and animation. You got Alan Wake 2, Hi-Fi Rush, Lies of P, Mario Brothers Wonder, and Tears of the Kingdom. I feel like on a personal level, I have to give it to Alan Wake 2. I have to. I cannot not give it to Alan Wake 2 because, like I said, this is the type of game that just oozes artsiness. It is full of art direction in so many ways. Things work on so many different levels. There is weird expressions of art and unexpected expressions of art that mesh with the storyline in interesting ways. I feel like Alan Wake 2 is just a juggernaut of being that type of artsy-fartsy game, right? If you don't like that sort of artsy-fartsy type of game, if you don't like that sort of art house sort of direction, I could very easily see someone saying oh, I find it a little too pretentious or whatever, right? It's a little too weird. It's a little too David Lynch, But in a best art direction category, it is Alan Wake 2's category to lose. I gotta put it at the top. For the others, Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Brothers Wonder, I'm kind of surprised to see Tears of the Kingdom there, because as far as art direction is concerned, it's good, but it's good in a world where it has a predecessor, where we've seen that before in Breath of the Wild, right? Which was hugely influential, and a lot of games copied that same art direction, right? There's no mistaking that Breath of the Wild was massively impactful in that way. And like I said, loads of places took inspiration from it, and you can very clearly see, right? For example, I'm pretty sure Genshin Impact will show up here, and that very famously, among others, but probably the most famous, it draws loads of obvious inspiration from Breath of the Wild. But I don't think Tears of the Kingdom changes it up that much, right? So I would not give it to Tears of the Kingdom, and if anything, I'm a little surprised that it's on here. I'm surprised that no indie game made it onto this list, right? Hi-Fi Rush is on here, which some people may, if you're unfamiliar, may say that it's an indie game, but it's very much not, right? It is very much not. You can even see down there with the publisher situation. It's not. It's made by the same folks who did The Evil Within 1 and 2. most recently. But Hi-Fi Rush, I think, definitely should be on here. Mario Brothers Wonder, I would say, should definitely be on here because it makes some very subtle changes with like how Mario is animated, right? One of the things I very much like about it, from what I've seen, is, of course, you have like the weird acid trip parts of the levels, which seems really awesome and really cool, but also just little minute details like how Mario is animated and tilted. Although it's a 2D game, he kind of runs at an angle that in some ways mimics like the older style of 2D Mario platformers, right? Just the ways in which it's all animated and stuff over the what would you call it? The new Super Mario Brothers art style, you know? I very much enjoy Mario Brothers Wonder. Lies of P, it does have some very cool art direction, right? But I feel like a lot of that is constrained to... in fact, I would say a lot of these are constrained, like all of these except for one are constrained to art direction as it applies to your art team, as it were, right? Your people putting together your textures, designing the sort of looks of your levels and all of that. Not necessarily the physical layout, but like, you know, like you can see in this picture behind little Pinocchio here. They're the folks who put together the costumes, the folks who put together like the cool intricate stuff in the levels that are fun to look at and all of that. How the music meshes together with it. But Alan Wake 2 is operating on another level, I think, when it comes to art direction. Like I said, it absolutely oozes it in multiple ways. It is hard to deny Alan Wake 2 this category. I think if there is one category that Alan Wake 2 is guaranteed to win, I would say it is art direction, because it works on so many ways and it meshes together in so many interesting ways. It works even in multiple mediums, right? Not just in 3D graphics, but in full motion video. And it does it pretty flawlessly, I would say. So I personally think Alan Wake 2 takes it, and I think the Game Awards will award it to Alan Wake 2. There we go. Next category here. Best Score and Music. Oh my goodness. All right. Now, Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Final Fantasy 16, Hi-Fi Rush, and Tears of the Kingdom. These three big ones here. Let's move down a little bit with our perspective here on the site. That way we can see a bit more of the folks behind it all. The composers, audio directors, and whatnot. For outstanding music, inclusive of score, original song, and or licensed soundtrack. Now, I've heard some... We'll work our way backward through this list, I think. Legend of Zelda, I don't think is going to make it, right? Because my understanding is it's very similar to Breath of the Wild, right? Which, Breath of the Wild itself, I love the little chimes and audio that exists in it. And by virtue of that, I enjoy what they do in Tears of the Kingdom, right? And it has this very calm sort of vibe, this very chill vibe. But once again, it is very much like what we've seen in Breath of the Wild. And even among Zelda fans, there isn't that sort of like big, super catchy tune, you know? You even hear among folks who love Zelda, people will argue like, well, I don't like Breath of the Wild, I don't like Tears of the Kingdom because it doesn't have this sort of kitschy sort of music or tune going on that Zelda games of past have had. Now, Hi-Fi Rush, I think it could win this because it is entirely a game about score and music. It is, if Alan Wake 2 is art and direction, the game, I think Hi-Fi Rush is score and music, the game, right? It's pretty much a rhythm game, you know? You're navigating these levels, fighting enemies, all to the rhythm of whatever is playing, right? The entire level sort of dances in rhythm with the music that is playing. So I think I gotta put that pretty high up there. Final Fantasy 16, I don't know too much of as far as score and music is concerned. So I'm hesitant to really say much about it. That said, by virtue of that, of it being kind of an unknown, I don't think it'll make it, right? I don't think it's operating quite on the same level as like Hi-Fi Rush, where Hi-Fi Rush is score and music the game. Baldur's Gate 3, I know has some very memorable music in it. Even having not played it, I know about Down Down by the River. Who does not know even a little bit about it? You would have absorbed some of that by way of like cultural osmosis, the zeitgeist of the moment of Baldur's Gate 3 coming out. You'll have known. But I do also know that there is a very peculiar part of the game I've heard about where music plays a good role. Right? I don't very much know the specifics of it, but there's like, I don't know, a section of the game or something where music is fairly important and does take a forefront. But that is a section of the game. Hi-Fi Rush is... It is the game, right? It is throughout the entire game. So I'm hesitant to say, well, I think Hi-Fi Rush takes it over Baldur's Gate 3 just because Hi-Fi Rush has it throughout the entire game, right? Whereas Baldur's Gate 3 has it during specific moments, specific key moments, which is great and fantastic. That's wonderful. But that's how you win something like Game of the Year, having it drop at specific moments. Having best score and music, you have it throughout, I feel, right? If you're a rhythm game in this way, I don't know. All right. Now, Alan Wake 2, because it does ooze art in this way, it is really good. It is incredibly good, and it is throughout the entire game. Not in the same way that Hi-Fi Rush does it. Absolutely not. I do think that this category is between Alan Wake 2 and Hi-Fi Rush. I would say... Oh, okay, without spoiling anything, throughout Alan Wake 2, obviously it has your typical like horror game audio design, you know, but that's not what this is. This is specifically the music, which includes the score, original or licensed. So at the end of every chapter in Alan Wake 2, there is an interlude period where you're just at a continue screen, and it plays a song that sounds like it could be a real song, but it is actually a song made by some sort of musician that they commissioned. Very typically, I think, a musician that has some degree of fame in Finland. But nonetheless, it's really high quality and sounds like it could absolutely be real. But as you pay attention to the lyrics, it's very much about what has just happened and transpired in the game. And it spans quite a few different genres, right? As far as the soundtrack goes. Hi-Fi Rush is my understanding, is more confined in its genre as far as music is concerned, because they do want it to be cohesive, because the entire game is the soundtrack, right? Effectively, it is the soundtrack. So they try to keep it directed in a certain way to sort of maintain the vibes, as it were. And I might be mistaken about that. To be fair, I might be completely off base with that, but that is my understanding of it. Alan Wake 2 has so many different weird little bits of the soundtrack. It's really incredible. Like there is, for example, there's a song that was very notable to me that is, well, there's quite a few. There's ones that are like, sort of like lo-fi R&B. There's one that is sort of, I don't know what you would even call it. I'm really horrible at music genre. But it's completely sung in Finnish. There is a really big part of Alan Wake 2, fairly early on, where music plays an enormous role and is like, if Baldur's Gate 3 has a section of it that has music at the forefront, Alan Wake 2 does the same, right? And also proceeds to weave in narrative and story in a similar way, right? Which I would imagine Baldur's Gate 3 does too, right? And Alan Wake 2 also has, I don't know, it's got this wild song that's like a fusion of hip-hop and metal. It's incredibly wild. It's incredibly wild. I think on a personal level, I would give it to Alan Wake 2. But that may be recency bias and because I've played it, right? But I think they will give it to Hi-Fi Rush, right? Because that is just score and music the game, right? I feel like it is Hi-Fi Rush's to lose. As much as I personally love Alan Wake 2, I think they give it to Hi-Fi Rush here, as far as score and music is concerned. So we're voting for Hi-Fi Rush. Next category here. Best audio design. Okay. Recognizing the best in-game audio and sound design. We've got Alan Wake 2 again, Dead Space, Hi-Fi Rush, Spider-Man 2, and Resident Evil 4 Remake. I find it interesting that Spider-Man 2 made it here. Right? Because my understanding is that a lot of it is just realism. Which realism, like, sort of going for that is noteworthy in and of itself, but I feel like it ain't gonna win you an award, you know? You would need a separate category devoted to evoking realism. To evoking, like, oh, the audio design here, it feels like I'm in New York City, right? There's people chatting away. There's a wild amount of, like, conversation. I don't know. Resident Evil 4, I feel like there's, like, it probably is doing pretty good, right? As far as audio design is concerned. But it is, I feel, attempting, its audio design is similar to Dead Space, and I feel like Dead Space does it better. Dead Space, for the record, doesn't have much, if any, original soundtrack playing throughout it whatsoever, except for, like, I don't know, you hear like an advertisement or a radio jingle or something like that. A lot of it is like creaking metal, eerie sounds, an absence of sound whenever you're like in the vacuum of space, which I don't think happens too much in Dead Space 1, if I remember correctly. No, it does. But there is like pounding that you can hear reverberating through contact where, like, you know, you can hear the vibration, which I'm not sure if that's how it actually works in real life, but it does evoke that sort of sense of science fiction, sort of, oh, you're in a vacuum, things sound fucked up and different. I feel like Dead Space does have very good audio design. Hi-Fi Rush, I mean, I feel like if Hi-Fi Rush didn't make it, if Hi-Fi Rush wins the prior category, it will not win here. Hi-Fi Rush will win either Best Audio Design or Best Soundtrack, guaranteed, right? One of them it will win. I don't think, on a personal level, and even on a non-personal level, I don't think they give it to it for audio design, right? I think they hit it up for soundtrack. Alan Wake 2, I very much enjoy, but similar to Resident Evil 4, it is just sort of... It's sort of in that same area with other horror games where, there's creepy noises in the woods. Little jugs of water when you're wandering around an interior make a creepy noise when you go by, and it gets a little bit creepier when something weird happens, I do love the sound of a certain enemy type. They sound like someone blowing wind onto a microphone. I very much enjoy that. It's very cool. But I think Alan Wake 2 is more liable to win for best soundtrack. I would give audio design on a personal level to Dead Space, and I think Dead Space will take it. So we're going with Dead Space. There we go. And the next one. Best performance. Now, I was aware of this. I feel like this is such a weird category, especially in such a jam-packed year. I get that they want to do something similar to the Oscars, right? Similar to the Emmys, where you award a performer with best performance, best actor, best actress, best supporting, something like that. But it's weird to see just 6, right? It's weird to see that. Anyway, we've got Ben Starr, Final Fantasy 16, who I believe plays the main dude, I want to say. Cameron Monaghan, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, your titular character. Idris Elba, of course, famously starring in Phantom Liberty, was all over the advertising. Melanie from Alan Wake 2 plays one of the 2 protagonists in that game. I think does a phenomenal job. Neil Newborn, or Newbin, people love this dude. This is Asterion from Baldur's Gate 3, my understanding is. And you can see how his face kind of looks like him, right? As with modern sort of motion capture and face animation capture, it helps a lot to have your actor sort of look like the character they are taking on the role of. Speaking of which, Yuri Lowenthal, a star, I would say, in the voice-over industry, who has voiced many a character, perhaps famously for my video games channel. He is the guy who famously in New Vegas said, "I just won the lottery!" Ooh, do you know what I'm talking about? He's that little weird dude, the powder ganger guy out by Nipton, I think, who won the lottery. That is him. That is Yuri Lowenthal. But he does do a very good Spider-Man. I very much enjoy him as Spider-Man. But I don't think he's going to make it as Spider-Man. Not amongst this slate, right? I find it peculiar that, I don't know. Would you prefer it be games here? Sorry, excuse me here. All right, sorry, excuse me. Had to take a quick drink. I just realized we're going pretty long with this video, right? As it turns out, I love talking about this shit a bunch. Anyway, I feel like Neil Newbin here, fantastic job, iconic, right? Everybody wants to be this guy or fuck this guy, When it comes to Asterion of Baldur's Gate 3, people love that motherfucker, right? I haven't even played it, and yet I've seen so much of this dude just by way of like the zeitgeist of the moment. The cultural osmosis has affected everybody, I feel. But I do think it's peculiar. I do think it's worth mentioning. Should these be nominated on a game level? Right? Because from what I've heard, so much of Baldur's Gate 3's voice cast is worthy of being nominated, right? Like, obviously, they have the max of 6 here. I feel like the max. But video games are so enormous compared to television and film that there are just so many noteworthy roles, going on. Especially when this is the one category that nominates an individual rather than the entire project, the entire game. It just feels very odd to me. And I'm not even sure how you would handle it, and maybe that's the same for them. Maybe they don't also know exactly how you would handle it. I have no idea. Because there's no shortage of folks in Baldur's Gate 3 who get their own degree of fanfare, right? Like I said, I haven't even played it, but I know of Shadowheart. I know of Karlach. People love them. There's so many folks in there who I've seen pictures of and little video clips I immediately try to click off of that people are raving about. They love it. They love them. Sort of same goes for Alan Wake 2. I think there's some fantastic performances in there. But of course, no one has a bigger role than your two protagonists, right? And so you have to pick one of them. And I do sort of like that Melanie is here over either of the two people who portray Alan Wake himself, because they have had also their own degree of fanfare in past Game Awards. Melanie is very new to, I would say, video games at least on the level of the two folks who portray Alan. Idris Elba, he's likable, right? He's a likable guy. My understanding is he did a banger job in Phantom Liberty. Very likely cleared Keanu, right? Which I honestly don't think that Keanu did that great of a job. Like, he's okay. He's Keanu Reeves, right? He's a nice guy. He's incredibly likable. He's like one of the most likable people on the planet. But is he that like banger of an actor? I don't know. I don't really think so. Right? He's just a really nice guy, right? He's in fun action movies and stuff. How do you not like him? That's part of his charm, is that he is kind of a doofus in that sense, That conveys part of the charm. Idris Elba, like I said, from what I've heard, has done a banger job in here with his performance, and that's why he's nominated. Same could be said about these other games, right? Like with all of these, there's such a massive crew of even just voiceover performers. It's so wild that this is just a category, right? Like, yeah, there's 6 people here, but my God, there are so many people nowadays doing voice work for games, in games, and so many of them do such amazing jobs. I have no idea how you even begin to award it, right? You could even split it up and do like best protagonist, best performance for a protagonist, best performance for a side character or whatever. And still the side character stuff would be jam-packed, right? Even here, there are multiple protagonist voices, right? I think it's only Star Wars Jedi Survivor and Final Fantasy 16 that have a singular voice for a protagonist. Other games here either have multiple protagonists or you create a character and choose your voice, right? You choose whichever type of voice you want. Yeah, I don't know. It's such a weirdly flawed category in and of itself. But I would not, as much as I enjoy and love Idris Elba, on a personal level, I would not give it to him, right? I would keep this strictly to voice actors and stuff. Like, I love you, but come on, we gotta stick for our own here, right? Like, give it to one of these other folks who pretty much only operate within the realm of games and other voiceover for like cartoons and whatnot. Whereas Idris Elba, dude is an actor-ass actor, right? He's acting in stuff. He's appearing in all sorts of media. Cameron Monaghan and Ben Starr, I'm not familiar with them. I haven't played either of the Star Wars Jedi Survivor or the first one. I don't remember what it's called. I haven't played either of them. I've heard great things about them. I've heard that Cameron is so much better, has improved massively for Survivor over the first game. And for Final Fantasy 16, I have no idea. I have no idea. So I'm completely in the blind there. Apologies to Final Fantasy 16 folks. I have no idea about this guy's performance. About the others, though, I don't know. I don't know. I would personally maybe give it to Neil Newbon, right? For me, as far as the Game Awards goes, I could see them giving it to Neil, Melanie, or even Idris, right? I think there is a decent chance that they vote in the most famous guy up here. That way he can appear on stage. I think that's possible. Will they do it? I don't know. I think it's possible, but I think it's more possible that it's between Melanie and Neil for the Game Awards doing it. On a personal level, I would probably give it to Neil because I see him all over the place. And you know what? On the level of the Game Awards, I would give it to Neil. I think that there's a strong, high likelihood that they give it to him. But I would say, second of all, I think it's possible that they pick Idris just so he shows up, right? But it would be horrible if he didn't show up, you know? If he can't show up to the award ceremony, similar to like Keanu has, that would be a nightmare, right? But I will give it to Neil, right? And like I said, it's a damn shame that this is just one person, because as much as people love this guy, folks rave about so many people just within Baldur's Gate 3. You know what I'm saying? Like we say, it's just a weirdly flawed category, and I have no idea how you tackle it. All right, innovation in accessibility. Diablo 4, which honestly I'm surprised also didn't have one of their voice actors show up in voice cast, right? Diablo 4 has kind of fallen to the wayside as seasonal content has come out. A lot of people, myself included, were not keen on Season 1. The main storyline, the main progression through just making it through the story, very fun, very enjoyable. But Season 1 was kind of like, it just obliterated everything, my desire to play it, especially in such a jam-packed year, right? Such a jam-packed year. You make one misstep, you're out the window. But Diablo 4, innovation in accessibility, recognizing software and or hardware that is pushing the medium forward by adding features, technology, and content to help games be played and enjoyed by an even wider audience. You got Diablo 4, Forza Motorsport, Hi-Fi Rush, Spider-Man 2, Mortal Kombat 1, and Street Fighter 6. I'm unfamiliar with a lot of the accessibility work that has gone into a lot of these. I'm not sure what Diablo 4 did to warrant this, aside from being like controller compatible in a major way, as far as accessibility is concerned, because it did that with Diablo 3, right? They did that with Diablo 3 and made it to where you can very easily and enjoyably play that game with a controller for its console versions. I guess there's crossplay, which is neat. Forza Motorsport, I'm not too sure about as well. It's a racing game, but in the sense of it being one of the more simulation-driven racing games, rather than Forza Horizon, which is like, hey, you're just driving around a fun car. Let's screw around and just fly all over the place and stuff. Get some weird-looking cars and stuff. This is for people who like racing, you know? This is for people who are really into going fast. Hi-Fi Rush, I believe I remember hearing something about its accessibility. Marvel's Spider-Man 2, I don't really know much about. Mortal Kombat 1, I really know very little about its accessibility. Yeah, I have no idea. Street Fighter 6, though, I did not even buy and play Street Fighter 6. I played the demo. But I did hear good things about its innovation in accessibility. And I think it will take it for this reason. Unless the others did something that I somehow didn't hear about, which is entirely possible. But I'm keen to give it to Street Fighter 6 personally, and I think the Game Awards will pick it. And that is because they set it up to where Street Fighter 6 is like meant to be one of the easier games for people to get into that is a fighting game. They made it to where you don't necessarily need to memorize inputs for combos. Rather, you can almost set up like a quasi hotkey system, sort of similar to like doing C button smashes, C stick smashes in Smash Brothers is my understanding. You just have like a key or a button that you press on your controller, and you can bind that to like, oh, I want to do a Shoryuken or whatever. And then you just bind it to that button press, and you will always reliably be able to do that rather than remembering like, oh, left, right, quarter circle, BA or whatever, right? I don't know. I'm terrible at fighting games. But that was such a big deal in sort of evening the playfield and making it to where in sort of advancing fighting games as a whole and sort of setting it up better in the future for more people to easily get into, to where it's like, yeah, you don't have to memorize this big move set. You just need to know what this ability does and know when to use it, right? You don't need to know the tactile precision of being able to execute the combo to perform the combo, you know? Which, for that reason, I give it to Street Fighter 6. And even among people who like fighting games, there's definitely some folks who wouldn't give it to Street Fighter 6 for that reason, because it opens the door for so many people to just easily perform combos in that way, right? I've definitely heard from some folks who don't like it for that explicit reason. But there's no denying that them doing that has made it more accessible. And they just don't like that it's more accessible, is what I'm getting at. All right, Street Fighter 6 it is. Next category. Okay. Look, we're less than halfway through, but don't worry, we're going to start flying through these. Games for Impact. For a thought-provoking game with a pro-social meaning or message. I do like that this has been now a recurring sort of category, but in this year, I've played 0, if any, right? I don't think I've played any indie games whatsoever, which typically these are indie games here, and we're going to see more indie categories. It's just been such a jam-packed year, so all of that has fallen to the wayside. I'm familiar with Goodbye Volcano High, Chia, and Terra Nil. So just by way of kind of knowing of them, I'm willing to give it to them. And I would assume that as we get deeper into these categories at the Game Awards themselves, they infamously do this. They will just announce the winners of multiple categories in rapid succession. They'll just be like, Games for Impact winner, it's yada yada, this game. And also, whatever the next influencer of the year is so-and-so. Well, no, they might put more fanfare for that because they want to get some viewership, you know what I'm saying? But maybe esports categories will be quickly glossed over, unfortunately enough. But hey, if they're trying to mimic the Oscars and stuff like that, the Emmys, they all do that, right? They all gloss over the more technical categories or sort of separate technical categories into a different day, a different presentation that isn't necessarily even broadcasted. Anyway, like I said, I'm super unfamiliar with all these, except for 3. So, I don't know. We'll just go for Chia. Just because I kind of vaguely remember the trailer for it. I think this main character turned into like a cute little bird, right? And that was kind of fun. And maybe like you can get knocked off of a cliff, and that's really weird and funny. So I'm giving it to that, right? Like I said, I'm sorry. I just have not been able to play really any indie games because the year's been so packed as far as like bangers coming out, and as far as me just being like fucking swamped this year, busy for better or worse. All right. I'm sure this will be another indie category. Oh, best ongoing. Apex Legends, Cyberpunk 2077, Final Fantasy 16, Fortnite, and Genshin Impact. Final Fantasy 14, not 16. I love that Cyberpunk is here. Right? Because all of these, except for one, and that being Cyberpunk, are games as a service, right? These are games that you're meant to play continually, ideally nonstop until the game shuts down for whatever reason, right? Apex Legends, I don't know too much about this year. I loved it when it first came out, but I absolutely fell off of it. As people started getting really good at it, and I just did not want to take it that seriously. Final Fantasy XIV always has you always hear about it having such a banger community. They keep doing enjoyable updates. People just generally love it. Fortnite had kind of a weird chapter. I do actually play Fortnite fairly regularly. It did have kind of a weird chapter with ups and downs. Just recently, it has had this like OG version where you go back to an older version of the game, which has been massively popular. It has made the game peak out at concurrent users that it has never before seen in its entire lifespan so far. Genshin Impact, I used to play fairly regularly, but I've fallen off of it. It had, I believe this year, it added in Fontaine, right? Which is, I think, sort of the like, isn't it meant to be like Francophone sort of area? I'm not sure, but it's very France-inspired and maybe American as well. I'm not sure, but it's their watery themed area. But I would give it personally, and I think will win it, is Cyberpunk 2077. I did not care for Cyberpunk 2077 when it came out. I was very much among the folks who were disappointed in it. And even if I replayed the core game today, I don't really enjoy how it is narratively set up. I just think it's... And the vibes in it, I absolutely dislike. Like, the atmosphere of it is way too, like, juvenile for me. Like, I completely bounce off of it. And it's not juvenile in, like, a Saints Row kind of way, in which I do kind of like it. Well, like, you know, older Saints Row, I guess I should say. It's not juvenile in that sense where it's just like really stupid and idiotic and it knows that it's doing that. It's in this way where it's like, it's meant to be shocking, right? With all this weird horny shit just everywhere. And it just doesn't land with me. That just doesn't work for me. When I want to get into Cyberpunk, I want something along the lines of it being more serious, more dour, more depressing, rather than like, oh, fuck, this is shocking. This is, whoa, there's a lot of horrible things going on. People are just too much. I love it when people are depressed and standing in the rain and looking down and crying, right? I like that, which that exists in Cyberpunk 2077, but it is not at the forefront in the same way that you would associate that sort of vibe with like Blade Runner, like Deus Ex, you know, your big tentpole cyberpunk genre media. However, I've heard that Phantom Liberty actually does great with that. Actually kind of puts that on the back burner and gets into some more juicy stuff. I've heard that people say that Phantom Liberty is just better than the core game itself. And of course, they completely rebalanced the entire game. They reworked a lot of the itemization and perk system to where a lot of things sort of function together. And it's like it's a satisfying action RPG now, rather than having, I would say, an identity crisis with not knowing what it wants to be because it went through such a hellish development. So I would give it to 2077 here. I would give it to Cyberpunk on a personal level, and I think it may win it because it is such a standout. And I do love that DLC and patches and stuff can get a game to show up here, even if it's not a live service game. I love the idea of that, and I hope this sets a precedent going forward. I want to see more games in that sense showing up. So we're going for it. Cyberpunk. There we go. Best community support. Baldur's Gate 3, Cyberpunk, Destiny 2, my God. Final Fantasy 14, No Man's Sky. Recognizing a game for outstanding community support, transparency, and responsiveness, inclusive of social media activity and game updates slash patches. Baldur's Gate 3, I will say right away, is probably going to win this. Right? It was an early access game for years ahead of time, and they had some pretty phenomenal communication, right? They were very, very much reading player feedback and crafting the game around it. And that is, frankly, part and parcel why the game was such a hit, I think. Why so many people meshed onto it is because they paid so much attention to player feedback and tuned the game accordingly, right? It is because of that early access period, years of it, that they were able to do it. It's why so many people say that's such an exceptional game. Even Larian themselves say that it's such a weird exception that it's incredibly uncommon for a game to do this, to pull this off, because not only was it in early access for so long, but it was a successful early access period where, obviously successful in the sense that they were listening to feedback and tuning accordingly and adding and whatnot. But they made a lot of money, right? The budget was immense for a CRPG, you know? So they just kind of got a lot of green lights on the highway, as it were. Cyberpunk 2077, it had that banger patch, it had that banger DLC that sort of turned things around for it. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't think it's quite on the level of Baldur's Gate 3. Destiny 2, they just had like almost their entire community support team gutted. They were laid off. We will talk about layoffs in a future upcoming in real life video where we'll focus on it. But they were just hit really badly by layoffs. I want to say even before then, the community was not into the quote-unquote community support. So it is peculiar that it's there. But also, a lot of their like head community team getting laid off is kind of like a great example of the importance of having a community team in the first place if you are a live service game, right? Final Fantasy XIV, it's slow and steady. It's just generally great vibes, kind of a banger in that regard. I only ever hear good things from folks who are into it. I wish I could get into it, but I tried it. I tried the trial like 3 different times. I just bounce off of it because of the sort of tendencies of it being a hotkey MMO. And of course, you start out on some of the weaker content in that game, which plenty of people who play that game are first to admit, that it's not until expansion stuff that you really start getting into the goods. But yeah, it's just all around good, right? It's not super phenomenal, which I think will mean that it doesn't win it, but it is good that it's nominated, I think. No Man's Sky, I think they do great updates and patches, but because they are such a small team, they barely communicate except for when they're about to do an update, right? So I don't think they're going to win, right? They regularly put out amazing patches and updates to that game, and they have massively extended that game's lifespan beyond what anyone would have thought possible. They've added so much stuff for free into that game. It still doesn't have monetization in the way that you would imagine. You just buy the game and you get it. You get all of those updates that they've been doing for years on end. It's ridiculous. It's wild. But they just really do not communicate that much because they're a small team, right? They don't have that sort of infrastructure to support it, right? They just quietly work on it, and then when it's ready, they put out a teaser, and then when it's done, they put it out and they put out a little trailer, and people are typically blown away by what's in it. So I would say it wouldn't take it here. I would probably give it to Baldur's Gate 3 on account of the early access stuff, but I think Cyberpunk is in the running for it, right? On a personal level and on the Game Awards, I would give both to Baldur's Gate 3. But like I said, I think Cyberpunk has a very good chance of winning that too. All right. Best independent game. Like I said, very sorry about this. As far as indie games, I've not played really any of these. And I have heard great things about all of these here. Cocoon, Dave the Diver, Dredge, Sea of Stars, Viewfinder. I've heard great things about all of them. There is controversy about the inclusion of Dave the Diver because it is technically published in some fashion, either directly or indirectly, by Nexon. It is technically not an indie game. It is not technically independent by way of the publisher. It's certainly not in the same sense as these others. It's got sort of that kitschy indie art style and aesthetic, but make no mistake, it is not, in the same way that Hi-Fi Rush is not an indie game. But yeah, I've heard amazing things about Cocoon and Sea of Stars. People who I follow that love puzzle games really enjoy Viewfinder. So I don't know. Dredge, I've heard, is really good as well, but I've heard definitely more about Cocoon, Sea of Stars, and Viewfinder. So I think Game Awards will give it to one of them. Personally, I would give it to Viewfinder because I like the idea of it, where you're using sort of perspective and scale to solve puzzles. I quite enjoy that. So because I just don't really know anything much about any of them, I'm just going to vote for Viewfinder. All of those three, I think, are very much in the running. I think Dredge as well. But like I said, I just haven't heard as much about Dredge, so I don't think it's quite as keen to win. But like I said, there is definitely that controversy there. Best debut indie game. For the best debut game created by a new independent studio. Right, which is a peculiar separation, but fun enough that they do acknowledge it. But this is very much one of those sorts of categories, like we said, that will get glossed over in the awards ceremony, right? They will just mention this very quickly off the cuff and not dwell on it. Let's see. So we've got Cocoon, Dredge, Pizza Tower, Venba, and Viewfinder. Well, let's spread the love. Cocoon. Boom. There we go. Easy enough. Look, like I said, some of these are going to go quick. Best mobile game. For the best game playable on a mobile device. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Hello Kitty Island Adventure. Honkai Star Rail. Monster Hunter Now. Terra Nil. I'm familiar with 3 of these. Terra Nil is a sort of like, I don't know, not quite 4X, but it's similar to like a City Skylines, but scaled down. Monster Hunter Now, my understanding, is kind of like Pokemon Go. Honkai Star Rail is a new thing from the folks who did Genshin Impact. Hello Kitty Island Adventure, I have no idea. I'm pretty sure that's the fake South Park game, but made real. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, I have no idea. I've heard something about it, but not nearly enough. I would say it's probably going to go to Honkai Star Rail just because it has so much cultural panache, or like it's very well known. I don't know. Mobile games, right? Very, very odd to have. Like, definitely not my forte, I will say. Mobile games, not my area of expertise. So I'll just give it to Honkai Star Rail, right? Because I could see them wanting to dish something out to Hoyoverse to get them to show up in some way, because they are a juggernaut of a moneymaker with Genshin. So we're going with that. On a personal level, I really have no idea. I really, truly have no idea. There we go. Good. Okay, best VR/AR, virtual reality, augmented reality. For the best game experience playable in virtual or augmented reality, irrespective of platform. We've got Gran Turismo 7, Horizon Call of the Mountain, Humanity, I have no idea what that is, Resident Evil Village VR mode, Synapse. Horizon and Gran Turismo 7, I've heard both good things about. Humanity and Synapse, I have heard nothing about. Resident Evil Village VR mode, I've heard quite a bit about, right? It is probably what I've heard the most about. Thus, I am inclined to give it to them, right? And it is, from what I've heard, maybe the most enjoyable game out here of this slate, right? Gran Turismo 7, also, it's a racing game for people who love racing games. That said, I've heard that among that crowd, they do not care for Gran Turismo 7, that it does some things wrong. I think as far as microtransactions are concerned, I remember there being some kerfuffle about that. Horizon Call of the Mountain, I haven't heard too much about. I remember when it came out, hearing a little bit about it, but it kind of faded into the background because it was such a year of so many wild games coming out. So on a personal level and for Game Awards, I gotta give it to Resident Evil Village. Look at Lady D there, Lady Dimitrescu. She's looking hot. Now you can see her in VR and really get that full experience, baby. Hell yeah. Bring out the sexy mods. Get that giant vampire lady in here. Voting for her. There we go. All right, next category. Best action game. For the best game in the action genre, focus primarily on combat. Armored Core 6, Dead Island 2, Ghost Runner 2, Hi-Fi Rush, and Remnant 2. Which, honestly, Remnant 2 may be one of the games I would have thought to see show up for Game of the Year itself in place of Resident Evil 4, right? Because so many people... Remnant 2 came out when there was a little bit of a lapse in bangers, in back-to-back bangers. So there was a bit of time for people to play it and get into it. And a lot of people enjoyed the first game. And from the sounds of it, the sequel is just such a great improvement on all fronts. People love it. Armored Core 6. I've heard good things about, but definitely not on the same level as From Software's other games, right? It is very much meant to be like a new version of Armored Core. It is pandering to, well, pandering, it sounds bad, but in the best sense possible, is pandering to people who love some big mechs, right? Dead Island 2 came out early in the year and people enjoyed it. They didn't like absolutely mind-blowingly love it, but a bunch of people played it and enjoyed it because it came out early in the year before it was just wave after wave of nonstop bangers. Hi-Fi Rush, really good, kind of the sleeper hit of the year is my understanding. I don't know. Ghost Runner 2, I have no idea. I've never heard of this game. I'm sorry. My apologies to the folks of Ghost Runner 2. One more level, 505 games. I'm sorry. I'm a fool. It's been a packed year. On a personal level, I would probably give it to Remnant 2. The Game Awards might give it to Armored Core 6 or Hi-Fi Rush or Remnant 2. I could see those three being in the running. I think they might give it to Remnant 2. I think there's a good chance. Typically, in the past, the Game Awards has surprised me with not running into usual bureaucracy, right? The bureaucratic answer here, where you want a lot of like a representation from different mega corporations, as it were, which, by the way, two of the standout games with the most nominations, Alan Wake 2 and Baldur's Gate 3, both, despite the years we have had of massive consolidation, neither of the two front runners, Alan Wake 2 or Baldur's Gate 3, neither of those two are like, they don't have a parent company that is enormous. There's no Sony, there's no Microsoft, there's no Nintendo, there's no Embracer Group, Tencent, none of that. They're just kind of out there on their own. At most, Alan Wake 2 was published thanks to, Epic. But they are not owned by Epic. Huh. If I wanted to be bureaucratic about it, so to speak, I would give it to Hi-Fi Rush, right? Which is really quite good, but is it best action game good? For the best game in the action genre focused primarily on combat. I mean, people say it is quite dope. I'm worried that I'm thinking about too much like it is a bureaucratic response to be like, yeah, give it to Hi-Fi Rush, that way Microsoft has something up there, you know? But maybe that's like, I think maybe Hi-Fi Rush does stand on its own merits. Because I remember when it came out, it was such a banger sleeper hit. That said, the same is true of Remnant 2. Armored Core 6, maybe less so. So I think maybe it's between Hi-Fi Rush and Remnant 2. You know what? Let's get risky. I'm going with Hi-Fi Rush on both accounts. Personal level and the awards show. I think it's going to be Hi-Fi for that. Okay. Best Action Adventure. For the best action adventure game combining combat with traversal and puzzle solving. Alan Wake 2, Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4, Jedi Survivor, Tears of the Kingdom. All bangers, right? All good games here. We're getting into genre stuff, which, I'm keen to knock off Tears of the Kingdom. Well, I don't know. Because it is similar to Breath of the Wild, but it does so much more with expanding like that game's physics system and was possible within that game, that like engine, you know? It does a lot in that regard. I don't think, for me, it's between Tears of the Kingdom and Alan Wake 2. Right? And I would say, well, okay, you know what? Yeah, let's think about this. Alan Wake 2, absolutely love it. It oozes art and direction, all that stuff. Narratively, absolutely incredible, sensational, phenomenal. I love it. But the puzzles are basic, right? The puzzles aren't that wild. They're just like regular horror game puzzles where it's like, oh, here's a math problem, figure out some numbers, look around the environment a little bit, right? The combat and traversal, you're just walking around, you're just shooting dudes. That's not the star of the show when it comes to Alan Wake, right? Much as I love it. Spider-Man 2, it's a lot of the same. It's just an advancement on what was in the first game, which was a banger, which is so good that I couldn't help myself but do 100% on Spider-Man 1 because I loved it so much. It was just so fun to interact with the combat and be Spider-Man. But it is more of the same. There is very little with regards to innovation and upping the ante. Resident Evil 4, I feel like gets caught in the same web as Alan Wake 2. That said, I think Resident Evil 4 has better combat probably than Alan Wake 2 because there's just so much more weird junk going on there. Alan Wake 2's combat is not the star of the show, so to say. Jedi Survivor, I remember hearing, did a whole lot to change around stuff. It's such an improvement over the first game. Like, I believe I've heard that you can just play the entirety of that game with a blaster instead of a lightsaber if you wanted to, which is pretty neat. But Tears of the Kingdom, you know what? Who could forget those giant monstrosities that people have made? You can create like a giant flying like dreadnought base that Link is flying on, dropping bombs and shooting missiles, shooting lasers, stuff like that. Who could forget the giant weird guy that someone made with a weird penis? Who could forget that? It will win this, right? You know what, Tears of the Kingdom? You're my personal pick and my ceremony pick for traversal and puzzle solving at best action adventure. Boom. There you go. I've convinced myself of it. Best RPG. Oh boy. Baldur's Gate 3 is on this list. There is no Listen, I'm sorry, everybody else. You got Baldur's Gate 3 up here. I'm sorry. I haven't even played Baldur's Gate 3 yet. But it's up here, man. It's a titan. It's a juggernaut. Things will never be the same now that Baldur's Gate 3 has come out. It's one of those games that people will always look back to as like, my God, what a release that was. Final Fantasy 16, Lies of Peace, Sea of Stars, and poor old Starfield there. Man, I love you, Starfield, but there ain't no way you're taking home Best RPG. Like, good God, man, I'd sooner give you Best Action Adventure than Best RPG. Sorry, that's just my relationship with these games. I love them, but I'm realistic about it. I like to think. What can we say? It's Baldur's Gate 3, right? It's Baldur's Gate 3. You cannot defeat them. They are unstoppable. There we go. All right. Best fighting game. God of Rock, which my understanding is a mobile game, or not a mobile game, a rhythm game. Mortal Kombat 1, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2, which I've heard people just don't like. Pocket Bravery, which I think is a mobile game, and Street Fighter 6. Both Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat 1 have released to pretty decent fanfare. People enjoy them. But I think people tend to enjoy Street Fighter 6 a bit more. As I've said, fighting games are not my forte, but Street Fighter 6 has done a lot. They have that, like, effectively single-player mode where you're, like, roaming around an open world. I'm not sure if it is single-player, but you do make your own character. Like we said earlier, in accessibility, it's set up the ways in which you can do combos and stuff. On both fronts, personal and ceremony, I think Street Fighter 6 takes it. It's just doing too much. Mortal Kombat 6 feels, from what I've heard, it feels like a more traditional type of fighting game that folks are accustomed to. Best family game. Disney Illusion Island. I've heard nothing of this. Party Animals. I've heard a little bit of it. It looks like goofy fun. Pikmin 4. Pikmin 4 actually a fucking banger, is my understanding. In another year, Pikmin 4 would show up more often on this, because it is supposedly a banger. Sonic Superstars. I've heard that it's alright. Mario Brothers Wonder. I feel like Mario Brothers Wonder is going to take it. Right? I've heard that the multiplayer mode is kind of fun. They don't have it anymore like in New Super Mario Brothers where you can like screw each other up by jumping all over each other. You can pass right through one another. But they have made it harder for kids, for young kids, because the little bubble mechanic is supposedly, they nerfed it. Right? I don't remember the specifics of it, but from what I've heard, they've nerfed it. But I'm going to give it to Mario Brothers Wonder. On a personal and ceremony level. There we go. Okay. Best sim/strategy. Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp. This is the game that was originally going to come out, I think at least last year, but got delayed because of the war in Ukraine. City Skylines 2, which I've heard some rough things about, right? It has been, from my understanding, a bit of a disappointment, but I have no doubt that it will eventually get to where it needs to be over time. Company of Heroes 3, I had no idea that even came out this year. I'm aware of Company of Heroes, but I did not even know that Company of Heroes 3 came out this year. What a year. Fire Emblem Engage, I think I remember hearing that this came out, and it was okay. I think it came out earlier in the first half of the year. Pikmin 4, it's good, right? I think that this is between Advance Wars and Pikmin 4. Right. I would have loved to have given this to City Skylines 2, but I've heard too much negativity about its current state. I'm giving it to Pikmin 4 because look at that little guy. Look at that guy. Personal level and ceremony level. Look at that little guy. All right. Best Sports / Racing. EA Sports FC 24, F1 23, Forza Motorsport, Hot Wheels Unleashed 2. The first one was supposedly quite good. The Crew Motorfest. I have no idea. I don't know. I've heard a bit. The one that I've heard most about is Forza Motorsport. So by way of that, this isn't really my type of genre. We're going with Forza Motorsport. On both accounts. Why not? Best Multiplayer. Baldur's Gate 3, Diablo 4, Party Animals, Street Fighter 6, Mario Brothers Wonder. We already talked a bit about Mario Brothers Wonder's multiplayer and Street Fighter 6. You know, it's a fighting game. It's got the accessibility stuff. Party Animals and Diablo 4, I don't think either of those stand a chance here. Diablo 4 did some interesting stuff with the open world aspect of it, but really none of this compares to the innovation that is Baldur's Gate 3, right? Their ability to mesh together, and I haven't even played it myself yet, but just hearing about its ability to mesh together traditionally single-player mechanics in a multiplayer sense, it's amazing, right? People rave about it. It's fantastic. The way in which you work together and can have up to 4 folks playing together, going through a campaign. They've truly brought that sort of Dungeons and Dragons experience to a computer or console near you and made it to where you and 3 other friends can get together and do it, right? It's got to be Baldur's Gate 3. There we are. Best Adaptation, right. I wonder if we'll always get this every year going forward. I'm not sure. Will there be enough adaptations? I don't know. Maybe there will be if we include, like, anime and cartoons, right? We've got Castlevania Nocturne, Gran Turismo, the movie, which I've heard sucks a butt. Last of Us, which I feel like is going to win. The Super Mario Bros. Movie, and Twisted Metal, which I heard that Twisted Metal is better than a lot of the trailers and ads let you to believe, but I ain't got time for that, right? It's better than you think. Okay, well, I'm glad for it. I will not be watching it. Although I played a lot of Twisted Metal as a kid, I ain't got time for that. I wish I did. I had time to watch something that was, it's all right. But in this year, I didn't have time for that. Super Mario Brothers Movie and Last of Us are the 2 frontrunners here. If you go for popularity, obviously Mario Brothers Movie is going to take it. It absolutely swept up the movie world, took it by storm until the Oppenheimer event, the Barbenheimer event, I should say, occurred. And then Barbie was like at the front of the show. But I don't think it will. I think it'll be Last of Us, right? Because listen, if the Game Awards want to get recognized on this kind of level and be recognized, sort of held in the same regard as the Emmys, as the Oscars, which there's a bunch of trash talking, but let's be real what they want, right? Let's be real. They want that renown. They want that prestige. So they're going to pick the prestige drama. It's got to be The Last of Us. And what a great show, too. I very much enjoyed it. Okay. There we go. Next year will be the Fallout TV show, which I'm very hopeful for. Speaking of HBO, being made by the same folks, well, some of the same folks who did Westworld, right? So, at the very least, the Fallout show, the first season is probably going to be really good. If Westworld is any indication, the first season is going to be awesome. All right. Most anticipated game. Which, are these specifically games that are meant to come out next year, I would guess? I don't know. Because I don't think that was always the case. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Hades 2, Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, Star Wars Outlaws, Tekken 8. Which I think these are all games that are slated to come next year. I think Star Wars Outlaws is the most in danger of being delayed. Right. And Hades 2 might not actually enter full release next year, but it will be early access. For me, it's either between Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Hades 2, right? It's one of those two. I think it'll be Hades 2 because more people have played Hades 1 than Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? So it has more familiarity. But make no mistake, a lot of people are looking forward to Rebirth. Myself included, despite not having played the first one. It's on the to-do list. So yeah, I would give it to Hades 2. I think that it is odd that there's not more games that are further out, because I want to say that was the case for the longest time. Tears of the Kingdom and Starfield, I think, were ever present on most anticipated, right? I want to say that was true, but I don't know. And that said, Hades 2 is coming in the future. And I'm assuming Silk Song will be next year, but who knows? Who knows? those Hollow Knight lovers are always suffering. They love to suffer. Let's give it to Hades 2. Personal and ceremonial level. Okay. Content Creator of the Year. For a streamer or content creator who's made an important and positive impact on the community in 2023. Now, I'm only familiar with two of these. One is a person and one is a group. Right? We have Iron Mouse, People Make Games, Quackity, Spreen, and Cypher PK. I'm vaguely aware of Cypher PK because he has a Fortnite skin that sometimes shows up in the shop, and I find the skin annoying every time I see it. He's probably a nice guy, right? I hope so. But I don't want that. Spreen, Quackity, and Iron Mouse, I've zero familiarity with them. There are so many content creators nowadays. Like, who knows anybody, right? Who knows anybody? I barely know anybody else in the same niche as me who's making videos about, not let alone role-playing games, but has a focus on Bethesda games, right? I barely know everybody there. Or CRPGs at that. But I would 100% give it to People Make Games. Granted, they are an organization and their little icon here is just their initials. But hear me out on a personal level. They made a really good, thorough documentary and deep dive in on the Zom Disco Elysium scandal situation. I don't think I actually finished it, but I watched over half of it, and it is really pretty good. And for that reason, I would give it to them. There we go. Great. Best esports game. Counter-Strike 2, Dota 2, League of Legends, PUBG Mobile, and Valorant. My understanding is that Counter-Strike 2 is out, but a lot of Counter-Strike diehards do not like it for some reason. But I don't know anything about that world. As far as all these other games, I don't know anything about their worlds either. Thank God. I don't want to know anything about people playing a bunch of Dota 2 or League of Legends. I don't want to be in the MOBA world. PUBG Mobile? I don't want to know anything about that. People in the Valorant? I don't know. Are they okay? I hope everybody's okay, but I don't want to know about it. I think the hope with Counter-Strike 2 is that it keeps getting better because it does do some interesting things on a technical level. Thus, I am inclined to give it to Counter-Strike 2 because of the technical advancements. But, I don't know. These are all the sorts of games that you hear about people playing, and every time they mention that they play it, they say that I hate it. Right? That's all these games. People are like, yeah, I got 1,000+ hours in Dota 2, and I fucking hate it. I wish I could quit. I ain't that person. So, on a technical level, we're going with Counter-Strike 2. There we go. On both counts. Best esports athlete. We have, well, they've got their little make-believe names here too. Okay, I like that. Right? I feel like this is indicative of one of the issues that people have with taking esports too seriously and why it's not gonna... People want it to take off, but I don't think it is. Right? I feel like we're finally starting to see pushback where people are like, yeah, maybe I don't really care. But I feel like, and this isn't necessarily the cause of it, but I feel like I said, it's indicative of it, is that they have their little make-believe names here. You know, they have their made-up pseudonyms. Faker, Zwaiwu, Demon One, Hydra, Ruler, Imperial Howl. Which, fair enough, I have a fake internet made-up name. But I'm not doing esports, am I? I don't know. Who's nice? These three people are smiling, at least in their picture, right? Which makes me want to give it to them, right? At least they look happy about it. This person here, Faker, that's a little mean. That's a little hostile. You got the red on black as well? You're looking a little too self-serious. I can't vote for that. This guy just showed up for something, and he just got his picture taken. He was having one heck of a morning, and he just showed up and was like, let's get it over with. But these other folks, I don't know, they're at least smiling in some way. I don't know, I'm the worst person for this. Who is the least problematic out of them? I don't know. I have no idea. I would assume that since they're all nominated, it says outstanding performance and conduct. Sure, let's give it to one of the smiling people. There you go. Enjoy. I don't know any of them. Best esports team. Oh, Evil Geniuses, Fnatic, Gaiman Gladiators, JD Gaming, and Team Vitality. I'm familiar with the first two from when I followed StarCraft for a bit. I used to watch Day 9 StarCraft videos religiously. I still like to tune into Day 9. Shoutouts to Day 9. Really nice person. But otherwise, I don't know. I could skip the category, but I think you get a little Chivo or something for voting in every single one of them. We only get 10% sway, so you know what? Let's go with, I don't know. Let's go with these folks here. Evil Geniuses. Why not? Hey, wait, that was the same guy I just voted for. He was in that picture. All right, there you go. I doubled down on it. Showing favoritism. Best esports coach. I actually did hear about this person. Christine Potter Chi or Kai. We've got, we're just going to use their fake names, I guess. Zonic, Gunba, XTQ, and Hom. But I did hear about this person being like the first woman to to have their team win an award, right? So why not? It's kind of a industry first event. Give it to you. There we go. I don't know anything about any of this. Best esports event. The 2023 League of Legends World Championship. Blast.tv Paris Major 2023. EVO 2023. The International Dota 2 Championships 2023. Valorant Champions 2023. I gotta give it to EVO. EVO is always so much fun. I don't even play fighting games, but I do like to watch fighting games, and what better place to watch fighting games than EVO? It's such a wild and weird place, and it still, after all these years, somehow maintains that weird underground feeling. EVO just has a special place in my heart as being like real shit. Right? I don't know. I gotta give it to EVO. It's EVO for me. All right. And I guess that's it. Yeah, there we go. That's the last of the categories. Eventually, there will be a player's choice category. I don't know why it hasn't shown up yet. This voting has been available for almost a week now. I don't know when it becomes available. I guess they're trying to run some sort of systems to detect botting, right? Because that was a big issue in years prior. People botting and just like dogpiling onto something. It's just a popularity contest amongst the general public, which means really who cares, right? But looking forward to the Game Awards. I am expecting to hear and see stuff there about future games. Here's some of my predictions for what I think we'll see there. I'm thinking we will see, well, we just talked about the Fallout TV show. I bet we'll do a trailer there if they are meant to be coming out in like late spring, sometime in the summer. I forget when exactly that was. They gave us a date, but I bet they will show their first trailer there. We might get teaser for Elden Ring DLC. Probably Dragon's Dogma seems very likely to show up there, especially if Dragon's Dogma is coming out earlier in the year, which sounds like it. I don't know what else we might see there. I could very easily see DLC teasers for various games. Like, maybe Starfield gets its first DLC teaser. I don't know. I'm not sure. But, hey, I think those three things we'll see. Fallout TV show tease. Probably Dragon's Dogma info. Right? That seems likely. And, oh yeah, and the GTA 6 reveal might be there. They don't really need to coincide it with the Game Awards, but I feel like Jeff must have really pushed for that. If it ends up happening, Jeff really pulled some fucking strings to pull that off. And, wow, honestly, congrats to him for being able to do that. He's come so far in such a long amount of time. But that ought to do it. Quite the long in real life video. Eventually, whenever I do finish Alan Wake, I am going to do an in real life that is sort of a post-playthrough review. Even though it's one that we didn't play on the channel, I still want to talk about it. My gosh, we've been going here for quite a while. I took one little brief break cut there to take a drink. But wow, I really need to use the restroom. All right. Apologies for taking up too much of your time, but hey, it's fun. It's fun to do this. We're probably going to do this for every year. Why not? Especially since we got the in real life stuff going. All right. Until next time, please take care of each other.